Well, good morning for those of you on the East Coast or the West Coast of the US, and for you others around the world, welcome. Nicole and I are very happy to meet with you all today and share with you our insider perspective on the MBA admissions process. Nicole, would you like to tell people a little bit about your background?
Sure. Thank you, MJ. My name is Nicole Shay. I spent the last 6 years on the admissions committee at Columbia Business School from 2015 to earlier this year. Spent a lot of time reading probably thousands of applications for both full-time and executive MBA candidates, as well as traveling globally for recruitment events, attending panels, and other events with colleagues from peer schools. So really excited to be here to share my experience.
That's a great background, and Columbia certainly is a wonderful business school. I worked at the Wharton School of Business as a director for about 12 years, and then I went to UCLA as an assistant dean of MBA admissions and financial aid. And like Nicole, I've read thousands of applications, interviewed thousands of people, and so I think we both can share with you a lot of the common pitfalls that people make in an application, as well as give you some pointers that you won't necessarily get from people who have not worked inside the industry. So we will begin with our deck. So Nicole and I both work with Personal MBA Coach, and we will talk a little bit about the company first to give you a little bit of background on the company. So we have helped clients around.
MJ, your screen is not shared yet.
Oh.
Just make sure you're clicking on that screen for that.
I thought I had. My apologies. Thank you for pointing that out.
While MJ is working on sharing the screen, which we can see now, MJ, also feel free to put questions into the comments box as we go along. We'll try to answer questions as we go along, but if not, we've saved some time at the end to address any questions.
Thank you, Nicole. So Personal MBA Coach has helped clients around the world get into dream schools since 2008. So we've been around 13 years. Last year, we were ranked #1 in the US on Poets and Quants, which many of you may be familiar with. It's a great resource for learning about MBA programs. We have been invited to present to admissions directors at annual GMAT conferences, which is the General Management Admissions Council. We've had a 96% success rate in placing our clients at schools of their choice, and our clients have received $6.5 million in scholarships last year, which is an incredible amount, and we're very excited about that. We are a boutique family-operated firm. We work 7 days a week, and we customize the services we provide to our individual clients. So they get one-to-one support from Scott or from Nicole or me, and Scott, Nicole, and I all work very closely with one another. So you're actually getting the wisdom and the knowledge and expertise of 3 different people and not just one consultant. Former clients are accessible to you, and you can network with them once you become a client. And we do have a proprietary project management system, which I just absolutely love. It reminds clients of deadlines when things are due. It also reminds us of when we need to help push along clients who get busy at work and sometimes forget some of the projects that they need to get done, so that people can get their applications.
Sorry to interject again. Sorry to interject. But can you please put the presentation in slideshow mode, please? Presentation mode. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure. So our team, the founder is Scott Edinburgh. He has an undergraduate degree from MIT, and he graduated from Wharton. He has 16 years of professional experience across consulting and financial services, travel, and hospitality. So he has a nice breadth of business experience that he can bring to clients, particularly when we're talking about career goals. He is a member of the AGAC, which is an association of international graduate admissions council members. And on this board, we meet annually, and all of the top schools will share their best practices with us, so we are aware of any kinds of changes that go on from year to year. Nicole, as she introduced herself, was an admissions director at Columbia Business School, and she's been a panelist for the Forte Foundation and the MBA Tour. As I mentioned, I worked at Wharton and UCLA. I have served on the GMAT, Forte, and MBA Tour boards, and I have had the good fortune to be featured in some top publications when they were inquiring about business school trends and procedures. Erin Edinburgh-Wand is our president of operations and knowledge management. She went to Yale, so she also understands the MBA program. She's a former Forte scholar, and she worked for 20 years at Bain and some other top firms. So as I mentioned, we are a boutique one-on-one MBA and graduate school admissions consulting and tutoring firm. We offer comprehensive admissions packages that cover everything that you need to know in the application process. So that includes working on your resume, figuring out your own personal story that you can share in the application that is your distinctive or defining qualities that you bring to an MBA program. We also prepare people for interviews, and we guide them in how to learn about different programs, how to differentiate them, and select the ones that are best fit for them based on their interests and profile. We do have early MBA planning, which means that we work with people 2, 3, sometimes even 4 years out of an MBA, so they can start looking at what they can do professionally to develop leadership skills, management skills, get involved in community activities, so that when they do apply to an MBA program, they've got a profile that's going to be strong. We do give tutoring for the GMAT, GRE, the executive assessment test, which is used for executive MBAs. And we have tutors who've scored in the 99th percentile or higher. I hear rave reviews from everybody who uses them. They give you wonderful strategies and tips and ways to ace these and definitely increase your score. We do mock interviews with 7 MBA interviewers, as well as Nicole and I. So today we'll answer these questions. What is the admissions committee looking for? You may be surprised it's not always what you think it is. And how can I avoid common mistakes? So what is the admissions committee looking for? Because the MBA is a professional degree, they are looking for relevant work experience. And by relevant work experience, it means, have you done work where you've been progressing, where you've had some leadership and management experience, very broadly defined. They're looking at your academic ability. Are you going to be able to handle the quantitative rigors of an MBA program once you're admitted? Do you have a focused career path? Do you have a sense of where you want to be after an MBA so that you can be most productive during the MBA and not just spend 2 years kind of wandering around, because there's so many opportunities once you get into business school? And then having a strong reason for pursuing an MBA. One of the things that admissions officers look at is your readiness for an MBA. Are you ready now, or is that something maybe you want to do in the future? And so part of that is understanding your rationale for wanting to pursue an MBA. So relevant work experience, what does that mean? It means that you have some unique or different experiences that you can share with others in class. And even if you have the same job as many other people coming in, every job is what you make of it. So you will have some experiences that you can share that your classmates won't. Do you have professional experience to apply to a future career? So do you have a background that would then lend to what you want to do in the future? Are you aware of your own abilities and weaknesses? One of the things that's really critical in the evaluation process is we're looking at people to see if they have insight, if they have self-awareness, because part of that lends itself then to working well on teams. People who lack these abilities sometimes don't work well with others, which is a huge part of the MBA process. We also look at management and leadership experience and or the potential for it going forward. Some jobs lend themselves more to management and leadership experience early on, some don't. And obviously leadership can sometimes be not title or your exact job, but sometimes it can be that you take initiative or maybe to start projects, or maybe you informally lead a cross-functional team or project. So think of it very broadly. So a strong resume is crucial for demonstrating your relevant work experience. So the difference between a professional resume and an MBA resume is a professional resume sells your ability to do a specific job. You are tailoring it to a job that you're interested in. So a lot of times you're using some of the same keywords, some of the same language, so someone can imagine you or envision you in a particular job. A business school resume sells your future potential. And so you provide evidence that you have been successful, that you have demonstrated leadership, even informally, as I mentioned earlier, and that you not only meet expectations, but you often exceed them. So what does an MBA resume look like? It looks very much like a professional resume. You list your professional experience, the companies, the titles, and the details. The details should not be like a job description where you list your responsibility, but you're looking at accomplishments or outcomes. These can be quantifiable, or they can actually show the impact that your work has upon a company's profitability, satisfaction of customers, some of the things that drive a company. Then you have your education, which moves down after you've been working. And one thing that you will find on an MBA resume is that extracurricular activities from undergrad are included here, where you normally don't do them for a professional job resume. And then you add skills and languages. So the key aspects of a strong resume. Obviously, you highlight your strengths. You show leadership where you can. And words that show leadership often are things like managed a project, oversaw something, led something, facilitated a project, collaborated with others, partnered with others. Sometimes it's having visibility by executive leadership by maybe making presentations to them. You want to include specific, ideally measurable results. You want to establish your key skills, and you want to prove that you did the job better than others or exceeded expectations. One of the problems that we find in people who write resumes is they want to include everything in the resume. You can't include everything, and think of it a little bit like you meet someone and you want to go out with them and get to know them. You don't tell them everything about you up front. It's a little bit more of a tease. And that's kind of the way a resume is. You're never going to be able to put everything in there that you have accomplished and done. People do not pore over resumes for a long period of time. So you want to hit the highlights, the most important skills and accomplishments that you have achieved. Avoid things like bolding words, using real short bullets, using real long bullets. You want to have nice margins. You want to have nice white space. You want to make it easy for the reader to look at. And on a subliminal level, having white space just makes it more conducive and polished. So we also look at academic ability. This is not an absolute measure. A lot of people applying to MBA programs insist on knowing the exact GMAT they have to know for a school, the exact GPA, when it's actually looked at collectively. So we look at your undergraduate record. We look not only at your major and your GPA, but we also will look to see if you've had quantitative coursework, such as calculus, statistics, anything that would show a preparation for an MBA program. Then we also look at an official test score. There is a correlation between test scores and success in the first year of the MBA program. That is why something like the GMAT was originally created as a way of assessing your ability to perform well in an MBA program. So no one wants to admit students who are likely to fail or have had significant difficulties with coursework. We look for patterns or trends. Sometimes people don't do well their first year away from home, but then there's an upward trend. I've seen a few people fail out of a business school because we took a risk on them. And I can tell you, it is one of the most devastating things that can happen for the whole community. So we also look at a focused career path. Do you skip jobs every year? Do you have specific future goals? And by specific, it's more than saying, oh, I want to work in the tech industry. Oh, I think I want to be a consultant, but I don't know why. I don't know what kind of consultant, whether it's healthcare or strategy or something else. And then understanding the future career path. So once you get out of an MBA, what do you want to do? And then what do you want to do in the long term, and how are they connected? And what is the vision for how you're going to drive impact in a particular industry, in a particular firm? That's really critical. So your career goals should be logical for you. There are no right goals. There are no wrong goals. And if you start putting down things that you think business schools want to hear, you will be wrong. Business schools admit a broad diversity of people who come from incredibly different backgrounds, whether they be nonprofit, for-profit, international organizations, NGOs. So they should make sense. If they're not natural, and if they don't flow directly out of what you've been doing so far in your career, then explain it. Admissions officers are open to hearing your reasons for wanting to change. It's not always unusual for people to come in and be career switchers, but we need to know exactly why you want to make the switch. So it's not like this shiny new object that you're interested in without any level of understanding of what it is you're really getting into. The last thing you want to do is come to an MBA program, end up in a job that you hate. And also consider both your short-term and long-term goals. Both of those are critical. In general, be very decisive and be specific. So if you want to work in a technology space, and that's a cliche there, space, but if you want to work for a tech firm, what kind of role do you want to have? Do you want to be a director of project management? If you want to work in healthcare, do you want to work on the provider side? What type of role do you want to have? So a strong reason for pursuing an MBA is critical. So first of all, know what an MBA provides. It is not just, hopefully, a piece of parchment that you're putting on your wall so that you can say, I have this title after my name. All MBA programs at their core will cover key areas of business such as accounting, finance, strategy, leadership, organizational behavior. Understand what those are and which ones of those are the most critical for you to help propel you for the rest of your career. How is an MBA going to help you with your career? Not just exactly the particular areas, but if you learn leadership, how's that going to help you in your career? How's that going to help make you a better manager, for example? How is understanding finance going to help you? Well, if you work in particular organizations, it'll make you much more conversant with the CFO, and you'll be able to talk in the language of the CFO when you're making proposals or trying to lobby for some additional funds. And then obviously you want to identify what the program fit is for you and your goals, as opposed to some other graduate degree. So schools are not looking for you to check the MBA box, as I mentioned earlier. So what do you want to gain from the MBA, as I just mentioned? And think of it in terms of skills and knowledge gaps. Think of what you've done to date, where you want to go, and what gaps you need to fill. Maybe you've worked in a very technical role. Maybe you want to study strategy because you know that strategy is going to be important as you move up in an organization and assume more leadership goals. try to avoid very broad brushstrokes of, well, I want business knowledge, or I want strong fundamentals, or another favorite of Nicole's and mine is, I need an MBA toolkit to help me with the rest of my career. So, important application mistakes to avoid. All right, this is a classic one. People often think that if they get a recommendation from a CEO or the president of the United States or another country, that the title alone is going to persuade admissions officers that you're a person we need to get into the program. Unless you know that person, that is not a good choice. It is more important that someone know you well, is a fan of yours, and is going to really say wonderful, glowing things about you. So prestige does not rule. You want somebody who will write an amazing letter. And they also should be able to compare you to peers. Like, how are you doing relative to your peers? What about you makes you distinctive? And if you haven't had a lot of opportunities in your current role for certain leadership or management skills, then they can certainly talk about the potential and what they see in you in terms of a lot of your qualities and characteristics. Sometimes non-professional recommenders are okay. They are more okay if, like, you work on a board with somebody and they can see a lot of the skills that business schools are looking for. So another thing that people forget is to include school specifics. So avoid vague statements that can apply to any school. And again, Nicole and I will tell you that we have heard so many people go, well, I want to come to your MBA program because it's collaborative. Well, all schools aim at being collaborative. Is there something unique in the way the school delivers that type of collaboration? If not, find something else distinctive about the school, such as a particular course or an activity you would like to be involved in. And don't pepper your application with lots of compliments, name dropping. We've seen a lot of these as if we're suddenly going to be more impressed with somebody because of who they know. We're very much in assessing people based on their profile and their potential rather than who they know. Do research the schools. There is so much information out there, both on school websites. You can attend school forums, information sessions, talk to current students. A lot of schools will have admissions ambassadors that you can talk to. Schools want to know why you want to join their unique campuses. And that's not just that they want to hear about their own school and that they're great. A lot of it is to make sure you're really a good fit for that culture and what they offer academically. And very critically is, what are you going to add to the school? You know, maybe there's an activity you'd like to be involved in or even start. What kind of role would you like to have in it? Would you like to organize an event or bring speakers in for the event? Would you like to start a new club based on an interest that you have that you don't see at the school? Maybe dance or something like that. By showing what you will add, it enables the admissions committee to picture you at the school and be a part of the community. So consistency is important. When admissions officers look at your application, they look at it front to back. They read it, they step back, and they go, what picture emerges? So things need to kind of fit together, and it needs to feel like it's one person. I can't tell you, and I'm sure Nicole would agree, there are times you read essays and they sound just like the recommendations, or the recommender will be describing somebody that doesn't sound like the person described in the essays. So show what makes you unique. Everybody has something that they can offer that is unique, and we'll talk about that in a minute. If you have a theme, make sure it appears throughout your application. Not everybody has had trauma or difficulties in life, but if you've had a challenge, or maybe, and that's influenced who you are and your goals in life, that's great. Or maybe you grew up in a family that instilled certain values in you. That's also appropriate. So if there are inconsistencies, then your application will be seen as not genuine and not authentic. Sometimes a candidate who's authentic and genuine, that alone can differentiate an otherwise modest profile. So everyone has unique personal stories. So here are a couple of profiles, and this is very classic. Consultants will come to us and go, oh, I'm just another consultant. I don't think my chances are good of getting into an MBA program. Well, first of all, there are no quotas, and not all consultants are made of the same fabric. So if you look at their profile here, Jenny has a little bit higher GPA than Michael. Her GMAT is 750. His is 720. They both worked at Deloitte for 3 years. They both had good clients. The first one is a music aficionado. The other one is a competitive swimmer. One does junior achievement. The other teaches underprivileged how to swim. And they both have their goals. So from an admissions perspective, when we look at them, Jenny doesn't seem as unique as Michael. So her short-term goal is to work in a tech startup. Okay, fine. I don't know what role that is. I don't know if she wants to work in a large multinational tech. Oh, it's a startup. Okay. And she wants to start a company in digital media. But if you look at Michael, he tells you a little bit more about his extracurricular activities. He seems to be a little more involved than Jenny was. His goals are a little more precise and more detailed. So in this case, assuming their essays are comparable, he's a little more competitive. So now we will turn it over to Nicole, who will share with you her perspective on the application review process.
Thanks, MJ. You know, everything that you said about the many times that we've seen some of these common mistakes rings very true. So next, we're going to take a deep dive into what happens when you submit your application. Next slide. It will really depend on the school who is on the admissions committee. It could be admissions staff, it could be career staff, outside readers, even second-year students for larger programs. And sometimes there are faculty that read your applications and help suggest decisions for some of the schools. People often ask why these groups are included in the evaluation process. And it's really because the committee wants to make sure that you're not only going to be successful in the classroom, but also in achieving the goals that you've set out for yourself. So sometimes they'll talk to the career management team to say, you know, we love this person. We think they're a great fit community-wise, but this goal seems a little bit unreachable. What do you think? Do you think they're going to be happy here in 2 years? Understand the success of the overall candidate down the line. Next slide. While there's some process variation across schools in terms of what happens when the application is received, in general, there's an operations team which monitors the receipt of all of your materials and confirms that your application is complete. And then the application is passed along to one or more members of the admissions committee for review. It's also worth mentioning that any candidate that the committee is considering admitting will be invited to interview. I think that there is a caveat there that during COVID, I think some schools have made small concessions and may offer admission without an interview if they think that you're stellar, but almost in every case, and certainly I see in the future, everyone that's admitted will be interviewed. Next slide. So how are the interviews used in the evaluation process? Next slide. Interviews are valuable to an admissions committee because they allow for another level of evaluation and from a different perspective. So like MJ mentioned, the application process is holistic. So it's not just how you perform in an interview. It's not just your GPA. It's not just your GMAT. But, you know, if there isn't this full picture or the committee wants to learn more or they think that you're stellar and they just want to confirm that, the interview can provide that confirmation for them. So interviews can be one-on-one with a member of the admissions committee, an alumnus, or even a current student. There are also schools that do group interviews with other applicants. And currently, most of these interviews are taking place virtually. Because we have former interviewers from top schools that work with our clients, we have a strong sense of what each school is looking for from an interview, and we're able to prepare our clients for interviews in the new virtual environment really well. We've seen really great success with this. Next slide. Interviews are also used to pressure test your goals. Interviewers are asked to determine whether the goals you've written about in your application are the same ones that you're sharing during your interview. You should be able to defend your goals and articulate why and how you imagine achieving them. So MJ talked in depth about, picking goals that are very specific, that are, practical. And so this is because even if you can do enough research to articulate how you're going to get and make a pivot in function or industry happen, you will need to then be able to handle some probing during an interview. And so if you don't have really strong industry context or really strong reason as to why you are making a pivot for yourself, if that were the case, that can get a little bit dicey during the interview. Next slide. At many schools, demonstrated interest, such as visiting campus, pre and post COVID, attending admissions events, and connecting with students is important. This is certainly true at a Columbia and MIT, among other schools. They're very interested in learning how you've interacted with the students, and they specifically ask about this in your application. However, other schools such as Stanford don't measure this. So it's important to know how to best spend your time when applying to business schools, especially given you're still working full-time. We can help clients build a strategic approach to your time allocation given your school selections. Next slide. The interview is also analogous to a job interview in many ways. So if you do perform well in the interview, this can indicate future success in the recruitment process, which ultimately results in the admissions committee having more confidence in your candidacy. The committee is concerned about job placement. They want to make sure that you're going to land a job before graduation, and more specifically, the job that you want. And so this is important to admissions committee because it's important to school leadership, which kind of also can affect rankings and the school's reputation. And so, really demonstrating that you have the confidence, you have the personality in the interview can translate into success in recruiting. Next slide. Keep in mind that each school provides the interviewer with different materials. So sometimes this is the entire application. Sometimes, and most often, I'd say it's usually only the resume. So at Kellogg, for example, they only provide alumni interviewers with a candidate's resume. However, like I know from Columbia, if an admissions committee member is interviewing, we would have the entire application. So it's helpful to understand what information your interviewer will have so that you can identify, what they see, what possible perceived gaps or weaknesses that they might have in mind, and then have a plan in place to talk about how you have or plan to overcome these gaps or weaknesses. So again, really understanding what they are looking for or what they might have questions about so that you can work on that. And again, we can help you convey your story based on what each school is looking for. We have interview evaluation guides that schools use that we can provide to clients. And as an applicant, it would be helpful to know whether to expect a more behavioral interview at a school like Tuck compared to a CBS, whereas Darden and Wharton have very unique approaches to interviewing. And so I think that's something we do especially well, is making sure people are prepared for those specific schools. All right, next slide. So let's talk about first what happens after a good interview. So sometimes there's another individual evaluation after the interview and before a final decision about your candidacy. This can sometimes be blind, where the reader can't see the previous evaluation notes. So it really depends on kind of the review philosophy of that specific committee. Next slide. After each, or then after the interviewer or the additional evaluation, the application will either go to the head of admissions or to an entire admissions committee for final review, and a final decision will be rendered. Next slide. If you have an unfavorable interview, what happens next is really case by case. At top schools, the application volume is so high that committees aren't often going to take the risk of admitting someone who wasn't able to conduct themselves well in an interview. If the interview was positive, but the interview shared some, let's say, yellow flags, you may be waitlisted so that the committee can learn more. We'll talk more about the waitlist process in a minute. Next slide. Depending on the school, decisions may be released either on a rolling basis or on a specific decision release date specified on the school's website. Also keep in mind that if you're denied admission, you'll either need to wait until the next year or application cycle to reapply. It might be obvious, but some people will ask if they can reapply, try to make an improvement, retake a test, and reapply in a later round once they've heard their decision. And that's not possible. You do have to wait until the following year. If denied, some schools will provide feedback and others will not. If a school offers feedback, this can help to inform future applications or even interviews at other schools. So, make sure you reach out and get that feedback. But if a school specifically says no, don't reach out. And if you're not sure and you reach out and they say no, then that is the answer. Don't push back. Schools typically don't have the time to give individual feedback. And so that's kind of, you can take a look at the class profile and maybe do a self-review. That can be a helpful way to maybe kind of understand how you differ from kind of the standard profile at a school. Of course, it's not perfect because classes are incredibly diverse, but it does give you some data points to compare to. And next slide. So finally, let's talk about what happens if you're waitlisted. First of all, the waitlist is a really good place to be. It means that the committee likes you and they see a fit for their community. Next slide. An applicant can be waitlisted for a variety of reasons. So it might be because they've admitted enough people to fill the class at that time, but they're interested in you if more seats become available. They might have some additional questions or concerns they'd like to address with you before making a final decision. This could be something that happened in your interview, like I mentioned earlier, or they might ask you to retake a test or have questions about gaps or experiences on your resume. They also might be concerned about your commitment or interest in their school. And so this is a way of evaluating if you're really interested or if you're just waiting to hear back from other schools. If you are on the wait list, take some time to reflect on what it might be that landed you there and if there are actions you can take to mitigate this. So like I mentioned before with the feedback, you could peek at the class profile. Maybe your test score is below the average, things like that. If you do think that you know what your weakness is, there might be things that you can do to mitigate it. Maybe prep again for the test, plan to take it again. What you should do in terms of interaction with the committee is, if you're waitlisted, varies a lot based on the school. So each school will have different instructions and processes. So be sure to pay close attention and follow them. Some schools like CBS and MIT will allow for additional notes of support and materials, and sometimes might even request a call with you to discuss your candidacy further. Whereas HBS has a more structured system and an applicant should follow the process very closely. In my time in admissions, and I'm sure MJ did too, I managed many waitlist candidates. And sometimes, and especially in the waitlist process, it's helpful to know what not to do or say. And the nuances of the waitlist process at each school are something that we can and have helped many clients navigate. Next slide. So like MJ mentioned, last year, our clients not only got into top schools, but they got a lot of scholarship dollars. We get much more scholarships than an average person just applying to schools. So last year, our clients received over $6.5 million in scholarships. And this is a small sample of the schools that our clients go to each year. So the next slide will talk about how we can help you. So we mentioned a lot of this before. We offer tutoring, private one-on-one tutoring. Like MJ mentioned, really great success in this area. We do a kickoff brainstorming call with you to help understand your story and help develop it with that common theme that we discussed. We do resume editing. We already talked about how important the resume is today and how, and we can help you convert that professional resume into something that's more appropriate for an MBA. For essays, there's unlimited editing for essays. We give guidance on content. We do line by line track changes and comments. And so it's a very in-depth process that we help with for all of your essays. And we also help with letters of recommendation. So if you're not sure who to ask after our tips earlier, we can help figure out who that might be. We can talk about key points that they should cover. And then, like I mentioned, we do mock interviews, and we have former M7 interviewers and MJ and myself who can help prep you to succeed in the interview portion of the application. Next slide. If you want a sneak peek into our approach and strategy, a great place to start is by checking out our top MBA application tips ebook. Here you can see more information about interviewing and how to write application essays. There's some advice for career changers. Again, more thoughts about how to think about your goals. Discussing the differences of the resume and letters of recommendation. So a little more information there. It kind of gives you a taste of how we approach the application. MJ, I'm going to ask you to go to the slide just before this one so that everyone has our contact information. So if you're interested in learning more about how we can help, or you want to schedule a free consultation, you can send myself, MJ, or Scott an email at the email on the screen, or visit our website. So let's see if there are questions. MJ, how about I kick one off to you, because it kind of had to do with your portion of the presentation. I think Sam had asked kind of how do you assess a university and program fit?
Well, I think some of it's culture. So some people thrive in a smaller setting than in a larger institution. So kind of think of where you went as an undergrad. Part of fit is knowing what type of curriculum is offered related to your potential career. So if some schools specialize in different things. So you have, for example, Babson is rated by US News and World Report as #1 in entrepreneurship every year. A school like Duke is known for being wonderful at healthcare. So is Wharton. It has a terrific healthcare major. So those are a couple of things. And a lot of it is just when you meet different admissions officers and clearly alumni or students at schools, who do you resonate with most? And then also think about, if you look at the career reports on websites, schools will show you where their alumni go around the world. And sometimes that can be a good measure of fit too.
Yeah, I completely agree. Making sure that it fits kind of across 3 dimensions. Does it have the academic, the career, and the community resources that are going to kind of help you achieve your goals and make you feel at home? So I see a question about extracurriculars. So the person has a lot of interest in activities and they've done a lot, but they can't figure out how to narrow it down and what to choose. So I'll take this question. I think, there are two options. You can continue to take part in a lot of extracurricular activities. If you are looking to narrow it down and kind of make a better use of your time, think about which extracurricular activities offer the best leadership opportunities, the best opportunities that align with what you want to do in your future, or opportunities that are going to complement your current work. If you have a sense of what your story is, if you do understand a theme, you might want to choose extracurricular activities, again, that complement or touch upon other aspects of your life. So it might be that there is an organization that fundraises for, someone with a specific medical condition, and you are a part of that because you or someone that has been affected by that. And then you might be part of another organization that you were just interested in, but maybe doesn't have a tie to your personal story. And so choosing the one that does have that thematic tie is likely going to be the better choice when putting together your application.
Nicole, may I add something as well? So one of the things that admissions officers look for is ongoing involvement in things outside of the classroom, or once you graduate, outside of work. So if you have a lot of one-off events, those may not be as important, or sometimes those one-off events can actually be grouped in one category, because on applications, they will ask you the periods of time in which you were involved in these. So in addition to what Nicole said, this also can be an important factor.
You're absolutely right. So MJ, from your experience of reading thousands of applications, can you share examples of candidates that were memorable?
That's a great question. One who strikes out to me who is memorable. It's interesting. This guy applied when I was at UCLA, and he was a poker player. And he made in the six figures money gambling for like 4 years in a row. Nobody wanted to admit him, yet he had like a 3.98 GPA in undergrad in math. He had wonderful recs. Everything else was stellar. Nobody wanted to admit him. We ended up admitting him, and he actually ended up doing investment banking on Wall Street, which nobody said he could do. Now, that's obviously an outlier. Somebody who really struck me once was, we had an applicant from China, and I studied a little bit of Asian history as an undergrad, and I understand a lot about Confucianism and a little bit about what that mindset is like. This guy had never traveled out of China. He was not very worldly. And you usually think that coming to an MBA program, you expect people who are globetrotters, and it's not true. And what struck me about his application was it was so authentic and it was so genuine. And I felt like there was a real person on the end of the application. And that's why I admitted him. So those are a couple. But in general, if you look at applications, what's often distinctive is just authenticity, because so many people have too much help with their essays, or maybe they didn't write their essays, or they're trying to create this false persona that they think we're interested in, which is not true. And as Nicole will tell you, admissions officers are very, very diverse in their professional backgrounds, in their interests, and their perspectives, which is why we have a lot of committee meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. So another question, can you always tell if an interview experience was negative? I don't think so. I think that there are a lot of occasions when someone might walk away feeling really good about the interactions that they had, but maybe and negative it's a hard word. It's very subjective. But I can think of an example of someone having a really good conversation, maybe feeling really good about how it went. Maybe they revealed too much. They, said that they wanted to do investment banking in their application, and then they were matched up with someone who's in private equity, and they went to say, like, actually, I really want to do private equity, but this is what I put in my application. And they had a great conversation about their industry. And then the interviewer went in and they wrote, well, he told me that his goals are private equity. And we had a great conversation. Well, that doesn't match. And that is going to leave a big question mark with the committee as to whether that's going to be the right fit. And whether they're confident that person can do that, or they're going to be unhappy in a couple of years. The other thing is sometimes you reveal too much and the interviewer asks, are you applying to other schools? And you say, well, yeah, I'm applying to Harvard and Stanford and Wharton in addition to Yale. And, the admissions committee might think that you really are a good fit. Maybe you're interested in healthcare and you're a perfect fit for the amazing Wharton healthcare program. That might leave some doubt in an admissions committee mind too, rather than just saying like, of course I'm applying to other schools. I'm looking for this aspect in other schools. And I think Yale is a great fit. So I think that some people come in with really good intentions and they don't necessarily understand how the admissions committee will look at that. And sometimes the interview isn't negative, but you're not applying in a vacuum. And so it kind of matters what other applications are being considered during that round. All right. Oh, things are hopping around. I just lost my spot. MJ, I'd love your perspective on whether or not work experience of 9 years has any disadvantage in the application process.
9 years?
9 years.
Okay.
An experience of, yeah.
Okay, because I have a different, mine says 3 years.
3 years? Well, maybe we talk about both.
Okay.
Too little or too much.
Okay, so when you look at the average number of years of work experience, that's just an average. There's always a distribution around the average. So we examine applicants. If you look at the years, it's for class profiles, it's the number of years that you will have at the time you matriculate into the program. So if you are an early career candidate, which means you would have 3 years or fewer at the time you matriculate, or even a little bit more than that, what we look for is the same thing we look in every other applicant. Where most people with less work experience fall down is they really don't know what they want to do with an MBA. They don't have any clear career goals. And that's why the bulk of them don't get admitted. Then in terms of 9 years, that's a tough one because at 9 years, depending on the nature of the work you've done, you could be a better candidate for an executive MBA. If you've had a lot of work progression, you've had significant senior level responsibilities, then an MBA degree is probably better for you. If you've done something where maybe you work in a job that's not a lot of upward progression just because of the nature of the industry or the firm, then a regular MBA might be better for you. The question for a full-time MBA, though, is, are you employable? And what are going to be your job prospects when you graduate? Nobody wants to admit you if you're not going to have great prospects and you're going to be unhappy once you graduate. So that then ends up becoming a key consideration.
Great. I think that's fantastic. Oh, I see what you were seeing now, that the questions are being highlighted. I think I wasn't looking at the highlighted question.
No worries. It's different on my screen than yours, so yeah.
But yeah. So how do colleges decide on awarding scholarships and what can candidates do to maximize chances? So I'll take a stab at this. MJ, if you have anything to add. Each school gives out scholarships, fellowships, or free money in different ways. So understand what that is at your target school. Schools like Harvard have need-based only. Schools like Columbia have a combination of need-based and merit-based. And then there are other schools that are entirely merit-based. So with need-based, just making sure that you're aware of that process and providing all the information that is needed for them to consider you. And for merit-based, they're going to look at your test scores. They're going to look at your undergraduate GPA and performance. They're going to look at, leadership opportunities, diversity. It's really up to a school in terms of the merit-based awards. to use the money for the people that they think kind of have moved the needle, who have done an outstanding job and have the potential to kind of really make a difference. And so it's hard to really say what you can do, but certainly something that you do have control over is your test score. And so that is one way, if you kind of really do very well in the test score, to stand out for merit fellowships. I'm wondering if you have any other advice in terms of how you can control this, MJ.
Yeah, so every school's different, and some of them are more or less transparent about their financial aid awards on their website. Some schools actually have very targeted awards depending on where they get their money. So sometimes an alum will go, I want to give money to someone coming from Indonesia because that's my country. Sometimes people go, I want to give some scholarships or establish them for women or people in the nonprofit. So those things also go into play too. And so you just put forth your best application and see how it turns out. There's really no particular thing you can do except just work hard and maybe with us, and we'll help you get a scholarship.
Yep, that's a great point. I think the next two questions are asking this similar question. So the first question being, would you recommend HBX Core? The second is, how are Stanford LEAD courses and other similar online courses, are they recommended? So correct me if I'm wrong, MJ, but I think it's just essentially asking kind of this auxiliary coursework that you can do. I do think, in my experience, that different schools look at this different ways. So I've seen schools say, and like talk to candidates about this and say, yeah, if you take like the Berkeley extension course, well, we would recommend that and put it on your application. I've also seen other schools say, it's fine that you do that. Certainly you can include that information in your application, but it's really only going to be helpful if it helps you better prepare for your standardized test and you increase that score. Because the way I think a lot of schools look at it is it's not, those things aren't as standardized. It's harder to understand what like stellar performance in an online course means compared to stellar performance on a GMAT, because they're all so different. And so a lot of times I would often tell candidates, while I was at Columbia, that, if these are going to help you better prepare for the tests, then go ahead and do them, but not to kind of go out of your way, spend a lot of money, thinking that that is going to kind of really move the needle on your candidacy. My advice, and correct me if I'm wrong, MJ, is just to reach out to the admissions committee or like the general admissions inbox and ask them. The worst that they can say is no or yes or not reply, but at least you'll have some guidance on how to use your time.
Yeah. The one thing I would say is if somebody has a weak quant profile, like maybe their quant percentile is not great on the GMAT, or maybe they don't have much of a quantitative background in undergrad, then the extension course that Nicole mentioned at a place like Berkeley can be helpful. And especially if it should be for a letter grade, because then you can measure relative performance. I've heard great things about HBX Core because that's focused on the specific skills you'll be using in an MBA program. But I wouldn't take it just to take it and create the impression that you're doing business stuff before business school.
Great advice. So this question is asking, how do you convey the story of having multiple companies? I assume it says in jobs. So multiple companies on your resume. And how do committees predict whether the candidate is employable post-MBA? Do you want to start, MJ?
Sure. So it's okay to have multiple jobs, multiple companies. And if those don't seem connected or they seem not to make sense based on your resume, then certainly you have an opportunity in the application to explain the rationale behind the changes that you made. And that's absolutely fine. In terms of employability, part of it's how realistic your goals are. So like if I'm a political science major and I've been working for a nonprofit and I say I want to do investment banking after an MBA, that's probably not going to happen with no finance background or experience prior to that. So employability is based on kind of what industry you want to go to, what their requirements are for people that they want to hire, and it really varies. Some industries want people who are 23, 24, that they can work 100 hours a week and for 2 or 3 years and then they're gone. Others want people a little more senior and a little more established.
Great. Yeah, I think I completely agree. Okay, so let's do one more question because I know that we're at time. So if I have a master's degree, can this positively affect my application? You know, is the GPA score of this program more important than that of the undergraduate program? I'm not sure what the last sentence is. AdComs have this sit in mind. From my perspective, I've heard a couple of things from different people. Is that master's degrees are net neutral. I would agree from my time on Columbia. You know, if you did have poor quant experience in undergrad, but then you were able to kind of demonstrate this in your master's, that's great. But I've also heard, you know, admissions directors say that this is just kind of a feather on the scale in a positive way if you do really well. So I think going back to what MJ said, I wouldn't go do a master's program for the sake of doing a master's program. And I also don't necessarily think that this is the way to feel confident that you are offsetting like a low GPA in undergrad. So for example, if you had a low GPA in undergrad, a 4.0 in your master's, then it's not to say that you could then go and do average on your GMAT. You really do need to use that GMAT to outweigh that undergraduate GPA. They're looking at that much more closely. But curious of your perspective, MJ.
I agree with you. I do think if your master's degree reflects an improvement over undergrad and it shows an upward progression, that can be a positive thing. And obviously, as Nicole mentioned, you still want to do well on the GMAT or GRE or EA. So it can be net neutral. It can be positive. It just all depends on what you studied, what coursework you took in it. And it can sometimes just add a really interesting perspective to your profile.
Yep, absolutely. So as you can see on the screen, you know, we really enjoyed all of these questions. They're really thoughtful. I enjoyed chatting with you this morning, MJ. It's always great to see you. If you're interested in learning more about how we can help, you know, keep in touch. There is a consultation link on our website, but we also had shared our emails earlier. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah. And the way to remember our emails is very easy. It's Nicole at personalmbacoach.com or MJ at personalmbacoach.com. And then, of course, there's Scott, too. But we do free half-hour consultations where we discuss our services and how we might best serve you.
All right. Well, everyone, have a great weekend. No matter where you are, I think the weekend is coming up for you. And we hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thank you. And it was nice again to see you, Nicole. And thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to virtually meet you.